This is the South Korean capital that is well known to you, and this is SJA, the new capital that you are likely unfamiliar with, which South Korea has been constructing from the ground up for the past 2 decades. Initially, this may not seem particularly noteworthy, as South Korea is not the first country to relocate its capital. However, upon closer examination of the reasons behind this decision, a different perspective emerges. Seoul has posed an increasingly significant challenge for South Korea, contrary to the usual benefits associated with having a global megacity like Seoul. In South Korea's case, its capital has been stifling the country, depleting its economy, and contributing significantly to the rapid decline in its population. What appears to be a simple news item about relocating the capital is actually a narrative of the country's desperate attempt to alter its grim future. Why has Seoul become a major issue for its own nation? Why is South Korea endeavoring to establish a new capital city, and why is it encountering difficulties in doing so? This is the story of how Seoul has detrimentally impacted South Korea. In order to understand why Seoul has become so dominant in South Korea, we must first examine how the city rose to prominence over the entire country in the 1950s. Following the war, South Korea was a starkly different nation compared to its current state. It was relatively impoverished with a rapidly growing population. The majority of the population resided in rural areas, evenly spread throughout the country, and Seoul was not significantly larger than other major cities in South Korea. However, post-war developments led to a shift in this dynamic, with South Korea implementing economic policies that supported its largest corporations, ultimately sparking the Korean economic miracle. The policy was primarily focused on Seoul, where the majority of the money and big companies were located. While the economy of the entire country was technically growing, the reality was that all the growth was concentrated in Seoul. This led to an influx of people from the countryside and other cities moving to Seoul. Eventually, the government recognized this as a problem. As the capital city prospered, the rest of the country fell behind, with the trend of people moving to Seoul only increasing. In the 1970s, the government attempted to address this imbalance by encouraging companies to relocate outside of Seoul. However, it was already too late as the issue had evolved beyond just economic concerns. To further boost the economy, the government promoted higher education for all. Since most job opportunities were in Seoul, individuals seeking higher education also aimed to study in the capital city. Consequently, universities in Seoul thrived, while schools in other regions struggled to survive due to low demand. With major companies and top educational institutions concentrated in Seoul, other industries followed suit. Instead of companies moving away from the capital, there was a trend of everything and everyone moving towards Seoul. Throughout the decades, the Greater Seoul area experienced continuous growth and prosperity, attracting an increasing number of residents and businesses. However, this rapid concentration of population and economy posed a growing challenge for the country itself. What initially seemed like an advantage of having an economic powerhouse soon transformed into a significant predicament. The influx of businesses and individuals to Seoul resulted in a decline in the quality of life in other parts of the country. Job opportunities dwindled, schools closed down, and the most ambitious individuals migrated to the capital, leaving behind a sense of desolation. Despite the peripheral regions losing their prominence, they still remained inhabited. Consequently, the government had to continue providing services, albeit for a diminishing population. As a result, the rest of the country outside of Seoul became a financial burden for the government, even though the lives of its residents continued to deteriorate. However, this situation not only affected the peripheral regions, but also had negative implications for the people residing in Seoul. The issue lies in the fact that almost everything is centralized in Seoul, compelling nearly everyone to be present there as well. More than half of the country's population resides in the Greater Seoul area, resulting in Seoul being one of the cities with the highest population density. Consequently, housing in Seoul is extremely unaffordable, particularly for individuals with lower incomes. This exorbitant cost of living forces hundreds of thousands of people to seek alternative housing options. These include illegally subdivided apartments known as jug banks and basement apartments called bunch-ha, originally constructed as underground bunkers for a potential war with North Korea. However, These spaces have now become the only viable option for families who cannot afford anything else. The issue at hand extends beyond housing, as Seoul's limited job and educational opportunities contribute to the intense competition that characterizes South Korean society. This competitive environment is not solely a result of cultural and historical factors, but is also a consequence of cramming a large population into a confined space with limited resources. Consequently, South Korea faces an existential threat due to its rapidly declining fertility rates, which are currently the lowest in the world. This decline surpasses even countries notorious for their population problems, such as China and Japan. To maintain a stable population without relying on immigration, it is necessary for each woman to have an average of 2.1 children. However, South Korea is currently facing a fertility rate of 0.72, making it the only country in the world with a rate below 1. This declining trend continues year after year. Consequently, South Korea has been experiencing an aging and shrinking population for the past 4 years, and this trend is expected to accelerate. By 2025, it will become a society with a significant proportion of elderly citizens, leading to numerous challenges. The social and economic systems of the country will become increasingly unsustainable as the number of elderly individuals in need of pensions, healthcare, and other forms of support rapidly increases. With a diminishing number of young people contributing through taxes, the burden on the system will become overwhelming. Eventually, the country will face a financial crisis where there simply won't be enough funds to cover all the necessary expenses. While South Korea is not the only country facing this issue, its lack of significant immigration and record low fertility rates put it ahead of others. The primary reason for the reluctance of both men and women in South Korea to start families is the high financial costs associated with raising children. This is not surprising considering that South Korea is the most expensive country in the world to raise a family, and the overwhelming dominance of Seoul exacerbates the situation. Living in Seoul comes with high housing costs and intense competition for top schools, leading parents to invest in private education from a very young age. This cycle of expenses is unavoidable, as the best job opportunities are concentrated in the capital. South Korea attempted to address this issue by planning a new capital city, Sejong, to distribute resources more evenly across the country. However, the success of this plan remains uncertain, as Seoul continues to dominate the nation's economy and resources. However, despite the decision being made more than 2 decades ago, it has yet to materialize. The entire process has been progressing at an alarmingly slow pace. Although the current plan is to relocate the entire administrative and government structure of the country to a place like Jeon by 2030, there is a possibility that it may never fully come to fruition. The main obstacle lies in the significant opposition from almost everyone who would be required to move, including government employees and many politicians themselves. The reluctance stems from the fact that while the people may relocate, the schools, culture, and infrastructure would remain in Seoul, making the alternative location unappealing to many. Additionally, Jeon is not significantly distant from Seoul. Consequently, even if their jobs were to move, many individuals might choose to continue living in Seoul to ensure access to top-quality schools for their children, commuting daily. This would defeat the purpose of alleviating the housing situation in Seoul. Furthermore, with over 50% of the country's population residing in Seoul, the majority of eligible voters are also from the capital. Unfortunately, this means that their primary concerns revolve around Seoul, forcing politicians to prioritize the capital as well. This perpetuates a cycle that becomes increasingly difficult to break free from. Consequently, there is a high likelihood that nothing will change, and by 2030, the capital will remain in its current location, along with its inhabitants and opportunities, while South Korea slowly but inevitably fades away.